Well, I was going to say hello, everybody, but we don't know who's listening. If Colleen's there, then please do let us know that you're actually listening, and also comment, because I bet you could. So anyway, this month's event is all about, well, it's cryptically entitled "It Ain't What You Know," but it's all about knowledge, what you do with it, how you do it, when you do it, and maybe even what you can get out of it. It's a big topic, which I'm sure Stuart has some opinions on as well,
I have always got opinions,
which is
Derek, as
why
you
he's an
well know.
opinioneer. And anybody listening, I'm sure they have opinions on as well. So let's get started. It ain't what you know.
So, Derek, let's just start by, for me, I was just going to start by saying I did a little bit of thinking about knowledge. And for me, we ought to define what we're talking about here. So, for me, knowledge is understanding gained through experience or education, I guess, but mainly through experience, because knowledge comes from doing something or learning something in some way, which you then use in some way. So, for instance, you could learn a fact, and then you have to test to know that that fact is true, or knowledge about a procedure, or something explicit. So for me, knowledge is always about that. Okay, I know it, but what do I do with it? And 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 I think it's often linked with failure, and failure is a big topic. But I am worried that so often we think of failure as something bad, and I think failure exists on a sort of. I think we may have covered this in the past. I think failure exists on a continuum. And so often we put all failure down at what I would consider the bad end of the continuum. So I'm going to test my knowledge and it's going to go wrong. And it's because I've deliberately done something in order to sort of sabotage something. That's obviously a failure that we would want to avoid. But there's another end of failure, right up at the other end of continuum, which is experimentation. I'm testing something to find it out. And if Edison had always considered every failure down at the bottom end of this, that it was always a sabotage or something like that, we wouldn't have a light bulb, because what he did was he failed 10,000 times before he produced the effective light bulb. So knowledge for me is that testing on this continuum. And I think too often we look at this continuum of potential testing of our knowledge and failure down at the wrong end. We think about things as sort of, we mustn't get it wrong. Well, I think sometimes we need to get it wrong. We need to be back up at this end, which is where we're testing the boundaries and finding out if something actually works or not. We need to be using that for the generation of innovation and for generation of new ideas.
Indeed. But also for me, that's still only a small subset of knowledge, because there's a whole load of stuff which we might not actually learn through experience. We could just learn it by reading the Beano or whatever. But we could read journals till for all year, but that's an accumulation of knowledge. And there's knowledge also. There's the stuff that's written down, the stuff on our computer discs. Computer discs, in books, and the stuff that we just simply know is in our head. We've never written it down, and that could have been acquired in all sorts of ways. But at some point, it's not so much that knowledge is there. It's that as an organization, we know how to retrieve it. What's going to be useful? I mean, a seemingly non-useful bit of knowledge could be our receptionist that sits out the front, behind the shiny glass desk. She's very good at her job, but did you know she also is very, very good at I don't know, welding titanium? And that could be a useful bit of knowledge, particularly if our organisation is going to take off in a different direction. So knowledge, it's a body of stuff which could have been acquired in a number of ways, But the key is knowing what you've got and being able to recall it, which is what I think is the main sort of trick, if you like, that organizations need to get to grips with, rather than being sort of snooty about the knowledge and saying, oh, the stuff you guys mess about with, or you guys know, or you guys read is not really useful. Yeah, you know when it's going to become useful. I mean, what happens if Edison's mate had been I don't know, writing journal articles all about creating light using electric current, and Edison had never read them and had never experimented. We'd never have a light bulb, but he could have read it and thought, well, no, maybe it's not so useful now, not with all this gaslight about, but gaslighting could have become too expensive, too difficult to install, or explosive, as we know. So, as it happens, he did the experimentation, but you just don't know whether what you have is going to be useful or not.
So, do you think that knowledge, therefore, is intimately linked with testing then, or are you saying that knowledge is something which we may gather as understanding, but we don't have to do very much with it? Do we?
Both, yeah.
Is knowledge just corporate knowledge, for instance? Is that something that some people just have?
Yeah, I mean, no, I usually shy away from using the term knowledge, but it's know-how, it's stuff, it's stuff we know, and our method of acquiring it is neither here nor there. Some organizations will experiment and test a bit more than others. Others may just be like sort of knowledge sponges. As you can imagine, somebody who maybe works in, I don't know, corporate finance or something, their knowledge about the world, what's happening in the world, is going to be very, very well. That's going to be interesting to them. They don't experiment a lot, so yeah. And the other thing you touched on earlier on was the concept of failure.
Failure, I think, is a big one in this.
It is, yeah.
Learning and development.
I remember a long time. There's a guy, I might have mentioned him, a guy called Samuel West, who runs an organisation called the Museum of Failure.
Oh, I've come across this,
and it's all about the big failures, so Black Coke and things like this, which are absolutely stunning. But we had a long conversation about failure, and people sort of say, "Oh, well, you fail, you learn from it, great." Then these people who say, "Oh, fail fast." No, we don't want to. In fact, in an ideal world, we wouldn't fail at all because our experiments would succeed. But we just have to be prepared to fail and learn from it. So in an ideal world, we would succeed all the time and we would learn from our successes as well. But the organizations who've gone, and this was the thing that Samuel West brought up, I hadn't really thought about, the organizations who fail and fold are the ones who never, ever countenanced the idea of failure. They didn't think they could fail, and therefore they had no method of dealing with failure when it happened.
I think that's an important one because for me, you've described the organization, the sort of organization that's unable to do two things, one of which is review, because we've talked about this in the past, the sort of when something happens, it is an opportunity to review, and it's an opportunity to investigate and have insight. And there's an important concept that I think organizations fail to grasp enough of. That's an opportunity for insight. And many organizations, many people fail to use that opportunity correctly. The second thing that I think you've just talked about, and that is sometimes when people, you said people don't even countenance failure. Failure is not a bad thing. Failure, and this comes back to my thing about on the spectrum. failure is not about always being bad. Failure is this opportunity. And if we're not grabbing opportunities, if we're not looking for opportunities, we are unable to capitalize on those opportunities and learn. So you're describing to me a non-learning organization, one that just expects things to continue.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. And I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but I've heard it said that there's no such thing as failure. What most people describe as failure is just an undesirable or maybe an unexpected outcome, which sounds a bit cheesy. It sounds like a life coach has decided to make that definition, but in a way, it's true. And if what you weren't anticipating happened, then why? How?
And Colleen has popped into the thing saying, how do we learn? By making mistakes. You're right, Colleen.
Well, she's right. We learn by making mistakes, but we don't have to make mistakes to learn. That's the interesting thing. Anything we do, I mean, if somebody teaches me to make an Indian recipe, I haven't made a mistake unless I've got it really badly wrong. But that's still learning. So yeah, we don't need mistakes to learn, but often they can be the most the ones that stick in the memory the most. I don't know why I suddenly thought of Donald Trump at that point. But,
God, Derek, you do bring the conversation down at times.
Well, I do, but yeah. But that is an interesting idea. I mean, even if you're a dyed in the wool Trump supporter, you couldn't actually agree that everything he did worked perfectly, worked well, had the intended outcome. I mean, especially his stuff on tariffs. But he seems to be completely immune from learning anything, which is the interesting bit. And we do have CEOs that do actually behave like that.
Give me an example. Have you got one that you're thinking of when you say that?
I'm trying to think of an example from personal experience rather than something that's been. There's certainly a few who are slow to learn. Not thinking of, for instance, I would say a slow learner. An example of a slow learner would be somebody like the boss of Ryanair. He's not unsuccessful, but his hand. Maybe it's a strategic corporate sort of decision on his behalf not to change tack very quickly. But it does seem to me that anything to do with his customers as opposed to the airline industry itself, it seems to be very slow to get through. I'm just trying to think of other people. Well, you could go through politics, couldn't you?
Let me give you an example then, and it goes back to Colleen's point: we learn by making mistakes. I often think that too few people do actually sort of because maybe they are afraid of having to admit that a mistake has happened and failure is seen as a bad thing. But I am thinking about a situation, a major change at a business where it became obvious very quickly that the partner that had been chosen to deliver the change was not going to deliver it in the time frame required, and in fact they were very they were ill-equipped to do the job. But because reputations were on the line, because people had backed them politically, nobody was prepared to stand up and do the right thing, which was to say the project is failing and basically shoot the project in a public place in order to make sure it died very publicly. And I watched as this project continued on for 18 months, rudderless, without any form of management trying to take control, until eventually, essentially, it died a death because people just could not face the idea of getting involved with it. Did anybody learn from that? It was clearly not the shining example of success that everybody wanted it to be. Did anybody learn from that? No. A lot of the management moved on, and some of them moved on to a new organization allied to the first organization, and they implemented exactly the same project with almost exactly the same parameters, with some of the same people involved in the partnership that they'd been in the first one. Did that become a success? No, pretty much all the same things happened in the second project as happened in the first. People don't want to learn from things that haven't gone as well as they want, because they fear that somehow it will challenge their ego. It will challenge their ability to stand up and say what a brilliant success they've always made it. Everybody span it to be successful, and therefore they repeated it. There are too often people involved in these projects that refuse to go into them and try, first of all, to avoid the same issues happening again. And they rarely learn. And I think Colin's right. You learn from making mistakes, but it's the desire and the self-awareness to recognize your part in that which actually allows you to innovate and move forward.
You would think, though, even if people were being sort of purely selfish, you would learn. You would learn even if you didn't sort of, I know, in a corporate way, learn or disseminate that learning or whatever. You would think people would sort of, I don't know, put it in their own knowledge bank, if you like.
Agreed.
That if something like that ever happens again, just purely to make themselves not look really stupid, but they would know what to do or how to go about doing things. And that's the thing. It's terrible to say, but that's one of the reasons why our public sector is so bad. And it's been a theme that I've noticed ever since my wife worked in it, is that every 2 to 3 years people can actually move on, and they don't seem to learn, but they can leave the baggage behind.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Colleen has brought up another point there. It shows she's listening. Well done. But yes, psychological safety. And we've been talking about the top of the organisation, but particularly psychological safety is not neat, should be everywhere, but it's more important lower down, because those are the people who usually get it in the neck as well.
Yeah, and this goes back to the fact that people don't value failure as an opportunity to learn. They see failure as something which somebody will use as a criticism, or in a way to punish. Failure should be viewed, in my opinion anyway, failure should be viewed as the greatest opportunity any organization, any human has for learning. And failure is not failure. Failure is just an opportunity to innovate. Failure is an opportunity to gain insight. So go gain insight. Go out today and do something which will allow you to gain insight and move on.
Actually, that's a good way of putting it, rather than saying we'll learn from a mistake or we'll read a book. Just gain some insight of something.
Gain some insight,
because that also implies that you have sort of some sort of understanding. You haven't just sort of looked at, I don't know, the scenery or something like that. You might have looked at the scenery, but you might have I don't know, got some understanding of, I don't know, landscaping for argument's sake. If you gain an insight into something, then that is actually valuable, because you're and the thing, I only just thought about that. I'm quite clever once I have verbal direct. is that if you're
I've just
gaining
gained an insight to Derek Cheshire, and it's not one that I was expecting today.
no,
Derek
no,
Insight is intelligent.
indeed, but if you're doing something with a view to gaining an insight, you're creating new knowledge, and that really is the key, I think, rather than I think that's where I was that's where I was going with
that. Let's leave it there then, Derek. Let's leave it there with the opportunity that people have to go out today and gain some more insight into something by pushing the boundaries to discover ways in which they didn't know they could make success out of things which give them an opportunity.
Yeah, and that could be anything. That could be anything from the widgets you're playing with at work to, I don't know, taking a different route home from work and discovering you could get home in half the time, or whatever.
No, let's not go to those extremes. Let's not do anything as wacky as that.
Well, yeah, if somebody's partner knew they could get home in half the time, they could be in
absolutely
trouble.
Good Lord,
they really could.
Last thing you want to is end up being at home early. So
there we go. Some interesting topics covered there, and thank you, Colleen, for inputting. And when will we be? I wrote the day down. We'll be back on July the 11th.
Will we?
Yes, and unless of course somebody's going on holiday.
I'm not going on holiday that day, but I've no idea. I presume it's a Friday.
It is a Friday.
Well, there you go then. No, I should probably be here waiting for your words of wisdom.
Epiphany, as I called it.
Epiphany. That would be a good one, wouldn't it?
It would indeed.
Another one of them.
So we'll see you in a month's time for another exciting.
I've just realised that's the week after I get back from my jury service. So let's hope that the trial, whatever it is I get roped into, has completed, and I'm not still there doing my level best to enjoy the wonders of jury service.
Well, we're upgrading to 500 megabit broadband at the end of June, so I'm desperately hoping that happens when it's supposed to happen, and it keeps working.
Good Lord.
So there we go. Right. So it's goodbye from me, and
it's good night. Goodbye from him.
Goodbye from him. Goodbye.
Goodbye.